It's actually quite a busy day today, isn't it? We've got, so this morning, this is like Decentralized Identity 101 this morning, right? Just for starters, to get everyone up to speed, to understand what it's all about. And then Kim Hamilton is going to come in later on this morning, and she's going to be going through the standards. So first thing now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the standards, but Kim will talk about them in more detail. So that's decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. Then in the afternoon, I'll be talking about trust frameworks and governance frameworks and how they operate. And we've got use cases after that, okay, later on. And I can show you demos of decentralized identity and blockchain stuff working. So I might do that this morning, just to keep you all excited. All right, I think we should start, right? Let's just do this. So can you hear me okay? I've never used this stuff before. Is it a bit crackly or is it all right? It's okay? Yeah? Cool. All right. So I've made the organisers really upset because I'm presenting from my laptop and not their laptop, and they're really a bit unhappy. So because I want to show a video first, okay? And then I'll tell you who I am. So let's see if this is going to start. Okay, we're going to get a bit of feedback, so don't worry about the sound, it's just weird music. Okay, so this is all about the problems we have with identity, with digital identity. Okay, it's just a short video. It's a really nice little one to look at, and it just reminds us what the problems are that we're all struggling with. So let me just tell you a bit about myself first. I'll just get this to present. Here we go. So my name is Andy Tobin. I work for a company called Evonym. We're probably the leading organization in this world of decentralized identity. We've existed for about 4 years, we're about 50 people. And some of the standards that Kim is going to be talking about later on have been written by us and our people. The decentralized identity standard is one of those. Before Evonym, I used to work in banking and mobile. So I used to deliver payment systems to banks all around the world, retail payments, not interbank payments. And I used to work at Telefonica as well. I spent 11 years at Telefonica. One of the things there was I did was build a bank for them. So I'm quite familiar with the banking world and the problems around identity in the banking space, onboarding, KYC, AML rules, and so on. So this presentation is slightly slanted towards banks, but what I want to get across is the new world that we're going into. Okay, and I think to do that, it would be good to just do a little exercise. So, has anyone got a passport? Does anyone have a passport with them? Fantastic. So I'm going to come off the stage. Okay. So let's imagine you stand up. So you just arrived in Switzerland at the airport. And you're the boarding guard. You're Switzerland. We need to check. You're Switzerland. And you
looks good, but you know, I want to take the story, so we connect first. So, looks like.
You leave that back. Stay where you are. So this is very normal. We all know how to do this. Right? Now, let's move into how this works in the digital world. Okay. So you're still a board guard. So you give me your passport. Okay. I'm a digital identity provider. You're now getting worried. Yes, you are. Okay, got that. Okay, there you go. I've now built these passports. Now selling this data to legal. Transaction is no longer private. Okay, you've got an identity provider. So this is how we put the digital at the end of the exercise. So the question is, why can't we do this in a digital world? Why is there somebody in the middle all the time? So that is the problem we're trying to solve. So let's look at some. Imagine what could happen. So this is a bit from the viewpoint of a bank, okay? But it could be any organisation you like. But imagine if you could onboard any new customer with just one click. Okay? Imagine if every customer that you have has a secure connection. Okay, nobody in the middle. Imagine if you can verify instantly that every customer is genuine. Okay, like that. Now, it starts to get interesting. Imagine if you never needed any usernames and passwords. Imagine if you never had any fraudulent card payments anymore. Imagine if any time one of your customers bought something, you could give them a verifiable digital receipt of what they bought. So it could be they're buying a house or they're buying something from a shop. Okay. So for a bank, there's massive competitive advantage. If one bank could do this and another bank can't do it, then the bank that can is going to gain a huge advantage. So this doesn't just apply for banks, this applies across the board. Anyone who has anything to do with checking who someone is, establishing trust online. So we call this a seismic change. Everything you know about digital identity is wrong at the moment. What we've been doing, as we heard yesterday, the internet was built without an identity layer. Okay? The internet was built to connect machines to move packets of data. It wasn't created for cat pictures and Facebook and everything else. And the concept of usernames and passwords has come out of the sysadmins. You've got a system and you need to, I need to protect it, so my sysadmin will have a username and a password. And because that capability existed, it expanded out. When people wanted to access a service like a website, you protect it with a username and password because that's what was there. And that has continued for 20, 25 years. And it's not got any better. And there's been lots of attempts to fix it. But the basic problem we're trying to solve is, how do you trust who is at the other end? So when you're together, when you're with each other, I can share a piece of information and you can give me a piece of information and we can trust each other. So like the passport example you just saw. Okay? And that works really well when we're physically next to each other. But as soon as there's a gap in the middle and there's an internet in the way, it stops working. And all of the friction or most of the friction we have online is around trying to solve this problem. So if this problem of establishing trust was to be fixed, a whole huge amount of friction in the digital world would go away. So it's as transformational a thing as you can imagine. So what I'm going to try and do this morning is just describe a little bit about how this works and why it's so transformational. But first, terminology. There's a lot of terminology that is in this space, and it makes things really difficult. So you can get really confused very easily. So sometimes you'll hear decentralized identity, sometimes you'll hear blockchain identity, sometimes you'll hear portable digital identity. The one that seems to stick is self-sovereign identity, but even then, I don't really like it very much. So Evonym, we wrote some of the first white papers on self-sovereign identity. Sometimes I wish we called it something else. But let's just go with self-sovereign identity for now. So what is it? Well, it's actually really, really, really simple. And as soon as you get this, you understand how simple it is, your way of thinking about identity changes. So as we saw just now, you took a passport from your pocket and you could show it to this gentleman here. Okay? And I have one, and I have a wallet with some other things in. And I hold and manage and control these, and you all do. Okay? In the physical world, we have this stuff, and we hold it, and we manage it, and we control it. But in the digital world, we don't do that. Okay? Why not? Because there's not been a technical mechanism to enable you to do so. Okay? Imagine if we were able to hold digital versions of these and manage them and control them ourselves, and they had, I call it cryptographic superpowers. Okay? We can go into the detail of the technical stuff later on. If you want to know about elliptic curves and all that kind of stuff, we can do some of that. But the thing about Passport, it has the physical one, it has some security properties on it. It's got special threads, it's got metallic bits in it, it's got holograms, watermarks. These watermarks are there to enable you to determine if it's genuine. Okay? Now, in the digital world, imagine if you had a digital version of this with some cryptographic watermarks in it, digital watermarks that enable you to verify that a digital credential is genuine. Once you can verify that some digital data is genuine, then you can solve all of the problems we have with establishing trust. Okay. So this presentation is going to really start to introduce you to this, this mechanism for establishing trust and how it works. We're starting quite high level because there's a lot of people in this business who think they know what they're talking about. And they'll say things, and the things they say are wrong. And some of this was happening yesterday, and I was getting really cross yesterday. I was sitting at the back of the room. So what I want to do is just get some of the basic concepts across to you so you can understand when someone who is speaking to you that claims to know what they're talking about, you can understand if they actually do know what they're talking about. Okay? And also, by the way, ask questions. If you have questions, just put your hand up and we'll deal with them straight away. Okay? So terminology, credentials. This is a credential. Okay? I have here some other stuff. What have we got? I have a driving license. That's a credential. This is my roadside membership. You know, if my car breaks down. What else have I got? I've got some bank cards. Okay, these are credentials as well. I had my hotel key, but I've checked out. My hotel key is a credential. It's not an identity document. Okay. It's just something that allows me access to somewhere. That's a credential. Okay. So there is a global standard for these credentials. It's called paper. Okay. Anyone can print a piece of paper about anything. So here's a credential. Okay. Printed by ITU. Anyone can create a credential about anything. The question is, how do you trust if that credential is genuine? So we have paper, okay, we have plastic as another standard for credentials as well. So we know how these work, we have them, we get issued them by organizations, and we use them, we carry them with us. But of course, paper doesn't work online, okay? There is no equivalent in our digital world of paper credentials. So what happens is you spend a lot of time proving who you are using bits of paper or photocopied bits of paper or notarized bits of paper or filling in online forms. And what you get back is a username and password and maybe two-factor authentication if you're lucky that you can use only in that one place. So that's kind of pretty useless for anything else. So there's no digital equivalent of this. Yet every digital interaction, you need some form of trust. You need to know who you're dealing with. Now, maybe you just need to know somebody's over 18. It may be you need to know they're a Swiss citizen. You don't need to know their name. It may be you need to know that they're allowed in the ITU building. You don't need to know any other details about them. But what you do need to know is that you can trust them. So we've got a few people in the banking world here. In fact, who's not in the banking world? Not okay. Oh, some. Okay, so which industry are you in? That's it. Yeah, yes, the green one.
Yeah, so I am in the CTO office of Symantec and Broadcom, so I'm pure security.
Okay. So,
but I know very well the ICT and OTT world, but not at all the finance sector.
Okay, very good, thank you. And at the back?
Telecommunications.
Telecoms, okay, very good. Okay, so, yep. Telecommunications as well. And everyone else is banking, like central banks and such like, right? Okay, cool. So that's good, because if it was all banks here, then we'd just be focused on banks, whereas this crosses every industry, every possible online use case. And it's hard to get across the importance of it, but I'm going to try and do that today. So let's look at customer experience first. Think of every time you try and do something online and you have to fill in a form. Okay? Like it's your delivery address or your card details, or it's your advanced passenger information. How annoying is that? You try and do anything and you're stopped. You've got customer experience nightmares. And the problem with all of this customer experience issue is it's imposing friction. It slows things down. It results in customers dropping out of the transactions they're trying to do. And it really kills customer experience. So McKinsey, they think $1.6 trillion could be saved if you can fix this problem. I think it's probably a lot more than that, because it's not just about customer experience. So here's an example. In the UK, there's a group called the Open Identity Exchange. Well, actually, it's an international group. And yeah, OIX, yeah. So they got some of the brightest identity people to look at how it would work for a French citizen to move to the UK and open a bank account. Okay, and this is the model they came up with. So this is based on EIDAS, which is a European Digital Identity Federated model. And how can we do this? Let's have a look. So each box is a service. You've got a French identity provider. What they would do is they take your physical documents, they check who you are, and they scan, and they then create an account for you. And that account sits at the French identity provider. So they know that Marcel is Marcel. Okay? Then we have some gateway thing in France, and then we have another gateway thing in the UK, and some node, something called the Blue Service. I think that was IBM. Oops. Let's go back. Here is the UK bank. Okay. There's some attribute exchange that allows attributes, data, to be passed across. So I think there's 9 services here that need to talk to each other. They need to have APIs or connections between each other, and they need to have contractual relationships between each other. What do you not see here? You don't see the French citizen. Okay. I mean, this is an impossible architecture. It's insane, right? This is why digital identity at the moment is so painful, because you need to have mechanisms like this. Okay. So the way it could work, which is much easier, is like this. The credential provider, which is the French IDP, okay, they check Andy is Andy, and they give me a credential. So they already do it, right? The Passport Authority have given me this. So when they give me this physical one, give me a digital one. Please, make my life much easier. Give it to me, and then when I need to go somewhere and prove who I am, I take it and I show them. I can do it digitally. Okay? Suddenly, your technical architecture is massively simplified. You've gone from 9 boxes all talking to each other. Yes, please.
Yes, but it assumes that you are absolutely safe on each of the pieces.
Ah, yes. So this is the key point, right? Very, very good. How does the relying party know that the data they've been given is authentic? Okay, and this is where the magic comes in. Okay, I'm going to use the word crypto superpowers and voodoo and magic. Okay, but if you want to go into the technical details, as I'm sure you probably would do, you will. Perfect. So this is going to be good. Excellent. So yes, the relying party needs to know that the data I'm giving them is genuine. Right? So how could that possibly happen? So that's what we're going to go into here. Okay? This is the piece that has been missing so far through the internet and the world we live in, is the ability for someone to verify some digital data they've got is authentic. Okay? So here we're completely simplifying the flow from this insane architecture to an architecture that is much more like what we have in the physical world, where we get given these and they come to us and we can then use them wherever we want. And this implies that when I use it in a private manner with my consent and so on. So I'll carry on this a little bit, and then we're going to go into the detail of how some of this works. But if I'm given a credential like that, once I have it, I can use it anywhere I want. Okay? So you didn't have to get the permission of the passport office of Jordan to show this gentleman your passport. Okay, you have it, and you could show it to anyone you want to. Okay, so suddenly we're opening up this world from little silos where you have a username and password that's not usable for anything. Now I have the digital equivalent of these, and I can use them anywhere for anything. And suddenly the world of online trust opens up from closed silos that don't talk to each other to open. Okay. Now, now we're going to start getting a bit more detailed. Okay. It's possible in this new technology to combine attributes from different credentials. So an attribute would be like my name or my address or my date of birth. We call those attributes. So a credential will have many attributes. So in this example here, I've got, say, from the passport office, which is the blue one, I've got passport, and then maybe I've got a driving license, and then for some reason my gym membership is really important, so I've got a gym membership. Right? I can take an attribute from this, and an attribute from this, and an attribute from this, and mix them together to create a single proof. And all of that data in that proof, which is this one here, can be verified as authentic. So if you're a bank and you're onboarding a new customer and you're asking for 2 proofs of address and proof of citizenship, all from different issuers, that is possible here. So it's called a compound proof. Okay? So this is starting to get really kind of useful now. Yeah.
Just a nice question, because something like 2 years ago, I was at Sun Microsystems in the reporting of it. It was about University Alliance.
Yeah.
We are reading about that
Yeah, so there have been quite a few attempts to do something like this, but as you'll see, there's a combination of 3 things that have come together now that haven't existed, they haven't been combined before. Okay, those 3 things are the standard for decentralized identifiers, the standard for verifiable credentials, and distributed ledger technology. And I'll describe the parts these things play.
There was Katana or something. There was
yeah. There's the Kantara initiative. There's a number of them. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. There's been lots of people with very big brains who've worked out pieces of the puzzle, but these 3 pieces have now come together, and you'll see this in a second. So it's also possible to, instead of sharing the actual data, you can share what's called a zero-knowledge proof. So this gets really spooky. Okay? A zero-knowledge proof is a yes-no. Am I entitled to drive? Yes or no? I don't need to show you all of the data. I can just say to you, yes, in the answer to the question, am I entitled to drive? Okay? And you can verify that that yes is authentic and valid. So it's called a zero-knowledge proof. So this gets very, very powerful. You could go to the extreme. You could use a zero-knowledge proof to answer the question, am I allowed to enter Switzerland? Okay? Or am I allowed to board this plane? Or am I allowed to open a bank account? In reality, that's probably a bit extreme, because as you all know from the banking world, if you're going to open a bank account, you've got to comply with AML regulations and you need to capture the data. However, it's possible using zero-knowledge proofs to not have to share all the data, but just share a yes or no in response to an answer. So it could be something like, are you over 18? Everyone uses that example, right? Yes, I'm over 18. I don't need to share my date of birth. Okay. Yeah.
Will it go that far to say, from a payment perspective, do you have enough money to afford it?
Yes. So you would have, that would be called a calculated predicate.
Okay. Oh, that's even as a name.
Yeah, a calculated predicate. So what that means is, and it's like an are you over 18, it's where you have a number, and I can provide to you proof that my age is above 18 by calculating what's called a calculated predicate, and give you a yes or no answer. So it could be relating to a bank account. You could say, is your balance above or less than €1 million? And the answer would be, well, it's less, sadly. Because we didn't do an ICO or anything. So the most important thing is being able to check the authenticity of the data. Okay? So when these digital credentials get passed around, it's like they have a digital watermark on them. So think of it like that. This passport has some physical watermarks on it. The digital data has some digital watermarks on it, and they're far more sophisticated than the physical watermarks here. Blue screen of death. So, it's just going to restart. Do you want to pop it up on yours, actually? Should we do that? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, give it a minute and we'll just restart. Okay, so I'll talk about the slide that you just saw briefly there while this thing restarts. So, this is all completely useless unless the recipient of the data can verify that it's authentic. So the recipient needs to check 4 things. They need to do 4 checks. They need to know who issued the data. Okay? So in the example here that we did earlier, the Jordanian Passport Office issued your passport. How do you know? Because if you look at it, it says, okay. Now you could fake that, right? You could buy a passport that's that says that it's from the Jordanian Passport Office, but somebody who knows their stuff will be able to read the chip and check. Okay, so just give us 1 second while we bring this back together. This, by the way, is in northwestern Scotland, just in case you're interested. You know the Harry Potter thing where the Harry Potter train goes over the big thing? So it's not this one, but that's the same train line that the Harry Potter thing goes over. Of course, when I was there was no train, but let's not worry about that. Okay. Aha. I think I'm going to need to start GoToMeeting again, aren't I? Just bear with me, guys. Sorry for the technical hassle. But the slides are so good, it's okay to see them again, right? Yeah. All right, where were we? Okay. Okay, perfect. So this is where we were. So we're talking about how does the relying party, which is the name we give to the recipient, they could be called the verifier as well. But in the example we did earlier, it's how does the Swiss Border Authority know your passport is genuine? So they need to do these 4 checks. They need to check who the credential issuer is, because they need to have human trust in that issuer. Is the issuer the UK Passport Authority? That's the first thing. The second thing is they need to know, was the passport issued only to me? Okay? If I stole your passport and pretended to be you, that would be bad. So the way that works in the physical world is you look at the face on it, okay? But here, we need to do this digitally instead. The third thing you need to do is you need to check if the data has been tampered with, obviously. So if this passport had been changed, then you should be able to see that. But you need to be able to do this digitally as well. And lastly, and most importantly and most complicated actually, is you need to know if it has been revoked. So we have a project at the moment that's working on doctor identity with the National Health Service in the UK. And a doctor gets a license to practice, and that license to practice is issued by the doctor licensing body, the General Medical Council. Now, if a doctor kills a bunch of patients, they get struck off, their license to practice is revoked. So if I'm going around with a digital credential that says I'm a doctor, if the General Medical Council can't revoke that, I can carry on showing that I'm a doctor. Okay? Do you want me to restart the GoToMeeting again? The PC crashed.
So we have the idea already, or?
I think, sorry, just one sec, guys. Let's just get this going. There's a GoToMeeting thing for recording the session. Okay, so, yeah. And I got into trouble because I'm running it on here rather than on that laptop. Okay, do you want to give me the ID again? 388 869 493. There was nobody on it anyway, so.
On your computer, since you're going to come back again.
Okay.
You know, I think it's just easier instead of all the multiple.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't keep crashing, we'll be all right.
Okay, let's keep up fingers crossed.
All right, 1 second, folks. I think you need to make me a presenter, please. Okay, thanks. Cool. So as I said, it's my fault because we're using my laptop, and this gentleman's been very patient. Thank you. Okay, so imagine if the relying party can check these 4 things. So the digital data I'm giving the bank is watermarked with special cryptographic watermarks. And that allows them to check those 4 things. Okay? And I was talking about revocation. The way that you check revocation with physical documents like this is that you have to make a call maybe to the passport office. You have to phone home. Okay? You have to go to the driving license people and check if the license is revoked. Because this physical license, if I get banned from driving for speeding or something, this license doesn't disappear. I still have the physical license, right? So the only way to check if this is revoked is to ring up the issuer and ask them, or use some API. And that causes a bunch of problems, because that means everyone who wants to check if this is valid has to have an API to the UK Driving Licence Authority. And if it's a rental car organisation, that means they need APIs to every driving licence issuer in the world, which is why digital identity doesn't work at the moment. So imagine if you could check revocation without having to speak to an issuer. Imagine if this carries with it some watermarking that enables you to check revocation in real time without having to contact the issuer. Okay, that would be really cool. So, how does this work? How does the relying party verify that the data they're getting is authentic? And we need to do this without the bank having to speak to the issuer passport authority. Okay? If the bank needs to have an API to every issuer of data, right, then it's just too technically complex. So we've got a really difficult problem to solve here. We need the data to be held by me. I need to be able to present it, and the recipient needs to check it's authentic without having to have 1,000 APIs, 1,000 connections to 1,000 different data issuers. The other part of this is that if I showed this to you and you had to check with the UK driving license people, they would know I'm speaking with you. I have some kind of relationship with you, right? They would know, oh, I'm speaking to this guy. So that means they can build up a profile of me and start correlating everything I do. And that's a massive privacy problem. Okay? So in the physical world, I can show you this, and nobody else needs to care. And we need to replicate that in the digital world. So how does this work? Well, we have the issuer, they issue a credential. The credential has a bunch of data attributes. Those data attributes are digitally signed. I can take one or more of those attributes and present them to the relying party with those digital signatures in them. So the question is, how does the relying party verify those signatures? So what they need is they need somewhere, a store, where issuers can put their public keys that are used for signing stuff. Right? So basic public key cryptography, you have a private key that you use for signing stuff, and you keep that private, you keep it secure, and you have a public key you use for verifying signatures are authentic. So the driving license authority here, they sign each attribute with their private keys. But the relying party needs to be able to see the public keys. Okay? So the issuer has to store their public keys somewhere. Okay? This is pretty simple. Where are they going to store these public keys? So they could store them on my iPad. Okay? It's just a data store with public keys in it. So if all the world trusted my iPad to have these public keys and trusted me to not interfere with them and not change them, then my iPad would be a really good global public key register. But I think it's unlikely the world will trust my iPad. Okay? Now, you could use another store. You could put all these public keys on Google Drive. So everyone can access Google Drive, apart from maybe in China. But everyone can access Google Drive. So what that would mean is you need to trust Google not to change any of these keys. So maybe that wouldn't happen, right? So what you could do is you could put these public keys in a Swiss, National Bank of Switzerland. I assume there is such a thing. And a lot of people trust Switzerland, don't they? But some person in the National Bank of Switzerland could be paid a very large amount of money by someone in Russia to change a bunch of the keys. Okay. So are there any Russians in? No. Okay. I think I'm at the International Telecommunications Union, of which Russia is a member. Yeah. 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 Or Trump or something. No, I can't do that. Okay. So where the keys are stored is really important. And the key storage needs to have certain characteristics. First of all, it needs to be trusted by everyone, which means it's not run by a single organization. Okay? Because if it is run by a single organization, a bad actor in that organization can come in a back door, use some admin commands to change things. Okay? So it should be run by many organizations. And the potential to compromise a significant number of those organizations becomes really, really, really hard. Secondly, it needs to be tamper resistant. So it's run by many organizations, it's tamper resistant. And thirdly, it needs to be chronologically ordered. Okay? Why does it need to be chronologically ordered? Because you need to know you've got the current public key for an organization. So if I'm the issuer of the driving licenses and my keys are compromised, I create a new key, I write it into the store, and everyone can start using the new one because they know it's the new one, so it needs to be chronologically ordered. So if you take those three characteristics of run by many organizations, highly tamper resistant, and chronologically ordered, you get a distributed ledger. Okay? Now, it doesn't have to be. It could be a database on my iPad, as long as everyone trusts it, but they don't. So a distributed ledger technology here is used for a really simple thing. It's used only to store the keys of issuers and a few other cryptographic artifacts from issuers. The data, these credentials, and this is really important, they never ever touch this ledger. These are exchanged like we do with a physical thing. I show you, you check it. Okay. The relying party, all they need to do is they need to do one request to read the issuer's keys, and that's it. And using that one request, they can check who issued the data. Okay, because when the data comes across, this is hard to do here, this data here, it includes the DID, the decentralized identifier of the issuer. And that tells the relying party which ledger, where to go, where is that DID stored. They go down here and they find it, and they find the public keys of the issuer. And they can then check the signature is good. So then they know who issued the data, and they know it's not been tampered with. So that's two of the checks. Remember, there's four. Okay. The next check is how do they know? Yeah.
Just a real technical question. How does it know where to find the ledger? Is it like through a DNS request or?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. How does it know where to go? So the DID, as we'll see in a minute, has a method in it, and the method points to where the store is. Okay. So in this case, the sovereign ledger, as we'll see in a minute, which has been designed just for this purpose, the method is DID:SOV. But there's other methods like DID:BTCR for Bitcoin, DID:ETH for Ethereum, and then the next bit is an address on the ledger to go. And then you recover from the ledger a DID document which has the keys in it.
But the address is what? IP address or?
No, I'll show you. It's the address of, essentially, think of it as an address of a block on a blockchain, right? It's a bit more complex than that, but I'll show you in a second.
I'm asking because there is a subtle problem coming from a totally different angle, which is due to the pervasive encryption that parties are trying to enforce. Anyway, that leads to DNS overage.
Well, yeah.
If you guys are encapsulated there, that means all the zero being centralized is now being re-centralized by the different parties.
So let's follow that through, because we've got the whole day to cover this. And Kim, who's just at the back, is going to cover DIDs and verifiable credentials in a bit more detail later. Okay.
So maybe we have to leave after I cannot stay for the
Okay, well, it's next, so it's before, yeah. Okay, so so this is really important, okay? A lot of people get really confused, or they have consultants come in who may have read some papers but not really understood it. Credential exchange happens at the edge, peer-to-peer. At no point are credentials or hashes of credentials written to here. This store. The ledger is simply a place to store issuers' keys. And it's a place that everyone can trust, because they know, in the case of the sovereign ledger, there are rules for the ledger. There's a governance framework that says, here's who runs it. Here's what happens when something goes wrong. Here's how decisions are made. So there's a governance framework, which is what makes the sovereign ledger unique. It's very different to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Other ledgers are available, but we'll come on to that in a bit. So, yeah, question. There's the big green button, the long one. Yeah.
So I don't know if I understood, but the ledger is not stored in only one place.
Correct. Yeah.
It's distributed to many places.
Yes. Yes. So I think there's about 70 sovereign stewards, and a steward is an organization that's volunteered to run a node of the ledger. So it's stored in many places. So in this case, 70 organizations across 6 different continents. Okay. So we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. Now this next piece is also phenomenally important. Yeah. Yeah, can we get it running on yours? Yeah. You have the slide deck anyway, right? Sorry, team. I could probably run it from my iPad, actually. So the point we're coming on to is one of the reasons digital identity today doesn't work is because there's somebody in between. The video we saw at the start, those problems of hacking, what they're doing is they're exploiting the connection brokers. So a connection broker, let's think of Facebook. Okay, with Facebook, you don't want Facebook. What you want is to share your pictures of your dog with your friends. Okay, with WhatsApp, you don't want WhatsApp. You want to be able to send chat to your family. So WhatsApp, Facebook, Telegram, they're all providing a service, and I call them connection brokers. They're providing the ability for 2 parties to connect to each other because those 2 parties don't have the ability to do that themselves. Okay? And therefore, they're an intermediary. Therefore, they're a hacking target. If you take the intermediary out of the way, so imagine WhatsApp without WhatsApp. Imagine I'm able to chat with somebody with nothing in the middle, no intermediary in the middle. This is particularly important for the telcos in the room. Okay, the telcos in the room are connection brokers. There's going to be some quite interesting implications for telcos here, because this new tech enables you to set up secure connections between 2 parties without needing a connection broker in the middle. Okay? So these are digital connections. Oh, we can do it here. This is fun, huh? Try that. There you go. I think that's you. Hey! Okay. So all you got to do now is find the slide that we're on. So, yeah, let's keep going through. Oh, shall I take it? This is kind of, it's quite complex. So are you guys following so far?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Because it sounds complex, but actually it's really, really easy. And once you realize why it's easy, everything becomes a lot simpler. Okay. And we've got here cures for many ills in the internet, including problems with GDPR as well. Okay, so where were we? We're here. Right. Now, let me do something else. So if I take my my business card, come down here, and I give you my business card. Okay. And you see on there's my mobile number.
Yep.
Okay, so you can now bring it.
Yep.
If I give you my business card, okay, and my mobile number on, and you can now ring me. You have the same number. Okay. So if I have, if we fall out, you start stalking me.
I'm not sure, guy.
And you can see my number with text messages and things. If I change my number, that now affects you, because you have a number as well. Okay. So I have one number that I give to everybody, And I have no control at the granular level about that number. What that also means is that that number can be used to correlate me. So you guys can get together and go, oh, I've got Andy, I've got Andy, because you have a unique number. This is why things like Aadhaar has to move away from having a single unique number and have these three because it allows correlation. So imagine when I gave you my card, if I could create a brand new number for you, just you, okay? And then when I gave you my card, I could create a brand new number just for you. Completely different. Okay? So when you call me, I know it's you because you're the only person I ever know. Okay? And if you're stalking me, I can cut that number off and it doesn't affect anybody else. So this ability to create unique identifiers without needing anyone. I don't need anyone else to create these numbers. I can create them myself. This is one of the huge innovations of this work, and these are called decentralized identifiers. Now, so this is all about making connections. A decentralized identifier, there are two types, and this is really important. There are public ones and there are private ones. So we call them DIDs. There are public DIDs and there are private DIDs. Public DIDs can be stored on the ledger. They pertain to credential issuers, which tend to be organizations. There's no GDPR implications for organizations. Okay? So public DIDs go on the ledger, but the DID that I create for the relationship with you, that's called a private DID. And when I create it, I send it to you. You create a unique one for me, and you send it to me. What we've done there is essentially a public key exchange. Nobody else needs to know about that relationship at all. That's why these are private DIDs. Okay, these happen off ledger at the edge, and I'm going to show you, if my PC wakes up in a bit, how all this stuff works. What time do we go to? 10:45, was it? Yeah, we started a bit late, so we're going to have a part two. So I'm going to rush through this in a bit. So we're going to come back to DIDs in a second, but once you've onboarded a new bank. That bank can give you a credential back. And once I onboard at the airline and get an airline ticket, they can provide me that airline ticket as a credential. So you start to build up credentials in your wallet. Like you do with your physical wallet, you acquire new credentials all the time. And these can be really useful. You can use them to log in. You can use them to prove anything about yourself. Okay? So the easiest way to think about this is that everyone who gives you a physical credential, be it a passport or a driving license or an airline ticket or one of these or a receipt for something you bought or a hotel bill, they can all be created as digital credentials as well. So this means a number of other things. I talked about usernames and passwords right at the start. If my bank gives me a credential, I can use that to log back into the bank again. Right? No username or password needed. So how does this work? So I've already proven to the bank who I am. They've onboarded me, they've given me an account and so on. They then give me a credential that says, you've got a bank account, it's a current account, etc., etc. When I go back to log in at the bank again, I present back proof I have that credential. And that comes only from me. Nobody else could have the credential. The bank can prove it's authentic. Okay, and they can log me in. So we have use cases with this with credit unions in the US at the moment. They're using it for call center authentication, actually. So we're getting rid of usernames and passwords as well. So to make this work, and this is leading into what Kim is going to talk about after coffee, we need some new open protocols. So the reason email works on here and works on here is because they all use SMTP, right? The reason we're all on Wi-Fi with whatever devices, 802.11 is standardized. So we're nearly finished, so we'll have to rejig it in a second. But there's nobody else on there anyway, so don't worry. So we need a new open protocol that's usable by anyone, anywhere. Open standards, no vendor lock-in, just like the internet. And this is how this becomes big. It becomes big because standards are open. Anyone can evolve, anyone can develop. So as a bit of history, Evonym, my company, we invented the code that makes the Sovereign ledger work and the Sovereign network. And we launched Sovereign in September 2016. And there's over 70 organizations have volunteered to run it since then, some large, some small. But the code base was then passed to the Linux Foundation, and it became known as Hyperledger Indy. So if you come across Hyperledger Indy anywhere, it came from ourselves. Here are some of the people that are involved in the Sovereign network. As you see, the variety of them indicates the huge potential for this technology. You've got CETA, which provide tech to all the airlines. You've got banks, you've got IBM, Cisco, obviously. Because this same technology, this same capability for moving watermarked digital credentials around, it can work for people and organizations and things. Same protocol. Okay? That's why you've got folks like Cisco in there, Deutsche Telekom. You've got the certificate authorities. InfoCert is Europe's biggest CA, based in Milan. Evonym, we are one of this number here. We don't run this stuff anymore. We are one of the organizations taking part. Two new code bases have come out of this as well. So Hyperledger, by the way, Hyperledger is not a ledger. A lot of people make this mistake. Hyperledger is an open source cooperative program run in the Linux Foundation. And it has a number of open source ledger projects in it, like Fabric, Iroha, Sawtooth, Indy. And then there's Hyperledger Ursa and Hyperledger Aries as well. So some of the building blocks of Indy have been split out. Ursa is a crypto library that does all the amazing zero-knowledge proof stuff, and Aries is the protocol for sharing credentials between different agents. We'll go into this a bit later, but I just want to, we're coming up to coffee break. I know we started a bit late, but I just want to show you this because this will lead into what Kim is talking about later. Two new standards being standardized at the World Wide Web Consortium. The last time W3C worked on an identifier standard was for the URL. Okay? So that should give you an indication of how important DIDs are. So DIDs are the thing that anyone can create as many as they want. So I will have a separate DID for every digital relationship I have. That means I have a separate secure channel, like a VPN, for every single digital relationship I have. And that channel is persistent as long as both parties want it to be persistent. There's nobody in the middle. Nobody needs to help me create a DID. I create it myself. This is one of the massive innovations. But a DID relationship does not convey any trust. It's a connection. That's it. Okay? Trust is established by exchanging credentials. So the DID gives you the way of connecting securely, but you don't know who's at the other end until you ask them. This is just how things are in the real world, right? You know, you meet somebody, who are you? If I really need to know who you are, like you're coming into this building, you might need to see some evidence and so on. So a DID connection is simply that, a way of being able to connect to any two parties, a company and a company and a car and a toll booth, a person and a car. They can all connect securely and effectively together. Okay? And that's what DIDs give you. And Evonym wrote 90% of the DID spec back in 2016. Verifiable credentials is the way that you create these digital watermarks for these digital credentials, and the way you exchange them, and the ability to have things like zero-knowledge proofs and selective disclosure, taking one attribute from one credential rather than sharing everything. Kim's going to come onto this a bit later on. And this, lastly, what self-sovereign identity isn't. So it's not a replacement for the organizations that currently issue credentials. Okay? You're not suddenly going to have people creating their own passports. Well, you could, but nobody would trust them. So you need a combination here of cryptographic trust, which is provided by the tech, but you need human trust as well. So you need to know the passport authority is the passport authority. You need to know the data has come through unchanged, but you need to trust the passport authority. So all of the organizations that currently issue credentials, they will keep issuing these physical ones, but when they issue a physical one, they're going to issue you a digital one as well. Okay? It's not a rip and replace for eIDAS. It's not a rip and replace for all existing identity schemes. It's a way of enhancing them. So if you take Aadhaar in India, which is a fascinating discussion yesterday, if you use this technology at Aadhaar, suddenly that data gets given to people. They can use it digitally anywhere they want to. So rather than sharing an Aadhaar number, they can share their name, their address, whatever other bits of data, whenever they want to, in a secure, private way. The other thing is self-sovereign identity does not work for blacklists and no-fly lists. Okay? Why? So imagine I arrive at Geneva Airport and they say, hello, Mr. Tobin. Are you on the terror watch list? And I say, yes, I am. Yeah, I have a credential that shows I'm on the terror watch list. Right? It doesn't happen, right? And those of you in the banking world know that you need to do PEP and sanctions checks. So blacklisting, here, the way self-sovereign identity works is you ask somebody to prove something about themselves and they can elect not to do that. Okay? This is why it doesn't work for blacklists. So you'll still need to have your blacklist checks. Now, a blacklist could be a credential provided from one organization to another, right? So that is kind of quite interesting. It also doesn't mean that people self-attest. So because it says self-sovereign identity, people start thinking, oh, it's self-attesting. I can say I'm Spartacus, or I'm the Queen. It's not that. I could say that, but you won't believe me. You'll ask for proof of who I am from my passport. So it's not about self-attesting. So we're into coffee. I can see there's some people flagging. There's a bit of snoozing going on. So I suggest what we do. Why don't we leave it at that for now? There's more coming. We've got demos coming. I can show you what a DID looks like. I have an app on my phone, and all you guys can get it as well, and you can try and you can play with this stuff. Okay? So we'll probably do that this afternoon. But if you want to have a look now, I can show you. So I suggest what we do is we stop there. We're 5 minutes over. So can we all come back in at 11:05, where we're going to switch over to Kim, who's going to be talking about the standards in more detail. How did DIDs work? How do verifiable credentials work? But I hope now you've got the basics of this stuff and how transformative it is. Thank you very much.